Hello, students and all the ATL in charge teachers. In today's online learning session, we are going to see how to build do-it-yourself soldering station accessories, including soldering fume extractor and helping hand, using all the material that is available within our lab and around us, including some of the material that is taken from some other old unused equipments. So let's see what is soldering first. So soldering is a process in which two or more items are joined by melting and putting a filler metal called as solder. So this filler metal usually needs to have a lower melting point than the adjoining metal. Unlike welding, soldering does not involve melting of the work pieces. It only joins the two metal by the material called as solder. So soldering has a history of 5,000 years. It dated back before 4000 BC. It was historically used to make jewelry, cookware, and other assembling stained glasses. Nowadays, soldering is used in plumbing, electronics, and metalwork. We in our labs use soldering for joining electronic components. Now, let's talk about what are different soldering accessories. First one is solder, which is used to join two different metals. It is a fusible metal alloy that creates a permanent bond between two different metal pieces. So it has a lower melting point than the pieces being joined, as we talked about, and it should also have resistance to oxidative and corrosive effects that would degrade the joints over a period of time. It also should have favorable electrical characteristics. Now there are different types of solders. First one is lead-based solder, which has PB, lead in it, which is hazardous to health. So they discovered the lead-free solder, and which is mandatory in Europe and US. And there are also solder pests available, which are required to manufacture printed circuit boards. Now these are the pictures. The first one is soldering wire, which comes lead or lead-free, and the second one is soldering pest, as I said, which is used directly to solder the surface-mounted components. Now, there is something called as soldering flux, which is a chemical cleaning agent. It is used to clean the metal surfaces to remove any oxides or impurities before actually doing soldering. These oxides are formed when the metals are exposed to the air, and they may prevent formation of good solder joints. So that's why the flux is basically used in soldering processes. The left picture is solid or semi-solid flux, and the rightmost picture is the liquid flux. So flux is available in both of these states. Now we'll talk about desoldering. So it is a process to basically remove the solder components from a circuit board for troubleshooting, repair, replacement. So the first component that is used for desoldering is desoldering bread, which is also called as desoldering wick. It is nothing but a copper wire coated with flux. So end of the length of a bread is placed over the solder connections of components being removed. The connections are heated with soldering iron until the solder melts and it is wicked into the copper wire by capillary action. So that is the function of desoldering bread. In this picture, we also see a desoldering wick. Then a vacuum pump is also used for desoldering. It basically used to remove the through-hole components from a circuit board. This pump is also used to pick up and remove tiny surface mount device from the circuit boards or electronic joints. Now, there is also called as hot air guns, which is used for desoldering. This gun blows air hot enough to melt all the solder around a small surface mounted components or even through-hole components. We need to use tweezers to remove those parts after this hot air gun removes the solder joints. The hot air gun has a tendency to oxidize metals, so we need to use the non-oxidizing gas like nitrogen instead of using air. So now let's see what is soldering station. It consists of one or more soldering tools connected to the main unit, which also includes the controls, means of indication of the temperature, and may be equipped with electric transformer. The soldering station also includes some of the accessories like holder, stands, soldering tip cleaner, hot air gun, soldering fume extractor, and magnifying glass with light. It also includes the helping hand to hold two different components for soldering. In this slide, you can see that a soldering station with a soldering gun and a soldering gun holder along with the tip cleaner. It also has a picture of fume extractor, which is required to remove the fumes which are generated during soldering process. And the rightmost picture is basically helping hand with light and magnifying glass. In today's session, we are going to build the do-it-yourself fume extractor and a helping hand. Now, this is a typical setup that we have in our Vigyan Ashram lab, the soldering station, which has all the equipments like soldering gun, then fume extractor, and these are different tools that are used. As I said earlier, desoldering pump, air, copper wire wick, and flux, and many other accessories of soldering station. Now we are going to see what we are going to make in today's session. We are going to make do-it-yourself soldering station accessories and tools the way it is shown in this picture. We are going to make the fume extractor using available material in the lab, like the empty spool of the 3D printer filament, the LEDs, and one 12-volt fan, and some other accessories like wood. Now let us see how to make the soldering fume extractor using the available material. So these are the material which are required: some wooden plank, soldering gun, a hot glue gun, 12-volt DC fan, then 12-volt DC adapter, mechanical tools like hacksaw, then plier. We also need a wire stripper. We are also going to 3D print some wing nuts and safety equipments like gloves and glasses. We are also going to use a foam, or you may call it as a sponge. We are also going to need LEDs to add light to the film extractor. We also are going to use scissors, marker, and insulating tape. And along with that, we need a 12-volt DC drill machine and a scale. Now, these are basically wing nuts that we have 3D printed. You can get this model on Thingsgiver. We will share that link with you. This is how we basically printed those wing nuts of M3 and M4 nuts, and we are going to try which one fits for available hardware that we have in our lab. These wing nuts are basically used to adjust the orientation of the fume extractor fan that we will see in the later stage of the video. So for mounting the DC fan for the fume extractor, we are going to use the empty filament spool that is easily available in our labs, since all of us have the 3D printers with us. Now let us take this empty spool and open these screws first using the screwdriver. Hold the nuts on the other side using fingers, and then release these screws. Now we are going to use these nuts and screws for the same assembly. So do not throw these screws and nuts. We are going to reuse these nuts. And as you can see that each part of this empty spool we are going to use. So basically now what we are going to do is we are going to divide the spool into two parts. Since this assembly is just like this, it is basically made up of two halves. So we are going to take these two halves apart, and we are going to use one of these halves for mounting the DC fan. Now we are going to use the long nose plier to remove these middle parts where we are going to mount the DC fan. So we don't need these middle parts. So we are going to use the plier to remove these parts. So make sure that you are going to use PPE hand gloves while you are operating this long nose plier. So take out these parts carefully. Take that waste aside, and then remove the extra sharp edges using the plier. You can also use the files. We will show that in the video. Remove these edges, burr using the plier carefully so that we can fit the circular DC fan in that circular shape or the circular slot. We can also use the files to clean that edges further, to remove that burr. You can use the flat file or you can use the round file, but make sure that you do not remove your gloves while also using the files. Since they are sharp edges and sharp burr, it is better to use the PP. After cleaning that circle, the part looks like this from inside. So now this is where we are going to fit the fan like this. So take the fan and insert those wires through the available slots. Make sure that you orient the fan in such a way that it will extract the fume and it will not just blow the air. Use hot glue gun to assemble the fan into that spool on that circular slot. Apply the glue all over or all around the fan so that it fits firmly into that slot. It will not remove over the period of time while we are going to use this fan on day-to-day basis. So apply the glue all across. Now, since we have applied hot glue gun, we are also going to do the next connection. So this is how this spool will look like along with the fan. Now we are ready to make the electrical connections. So strip the wires, positive and ground wire. Strip those wires with the stripper. Keep the enough metal outside. Continue to use the PP. Now twist those metal edges, metal wires, and apply the solder metal for tinning purpose on the metal wires. Apply on both the positive and ground terminals. Apply some solder as tinning on both the ends. Now take the terminals of the 12 volt DC adapter. Make sure that you are connecting positive and ground correctly. Apply some solder again here as a tinning on both the terminals of 12 volt DC adapter wires. Take help of your friend or your teacher to solder the wires of the 12 volt DC adapter and the fan. So take proper care while soldering, and the joints are ready. Now let's try making sure that the fan is working by putting the power on. Yes, it is working. Apply the insulating tape on the open terminals, both the positive and ground terminals of the wires that we just joined, so that there is not going to be a short circuit accidentally after these wires are touched to each other. Apply the tape carefully and all over the joints. Now let us take this sponge or foam sheet, approximately 5 millimeters of thickness. Cut it using the hacksaw. Take help of your friend to tear that apart. Cut it all through this length. We are going to use this sponge behind the fan to collect the dust from the extracted fume. Now take a marker and draw the circle using the spool, where we are going to basically cut this sponge using scissors. Continue to use the gloves. Carefully cut it around the marked edges, because we are going to fit it into that circle just behind the fan. This sponge is basically used to collect the dust particles from the extracted smoke or fume. Cut that extra thickness of the sponge. Take that waste aside. Now take that spool or our fan holder now and insert that sponge from behind. Just make sure that you are not going to touch that sponge to the fan that we just assembled some time back. If it is touching, just adjust the sponge and make sure that by turning the fan blades. Now we are also going to do initial trial. Let's see how this works. We are going to do some soldering and just see the fan is extracting that fume after the soldering is done. See that the smoke is being extracted. Now this is working. Now let's make a frame to hold this fume extractor using some wood available. This is how the stand will look like. We are going to use some available plywood. You can use some other material, plastic or something like that, to make a frame. Now we are going to make the side brackets for the fan. Those two vertical brackets that you have seen. Mark at the midpoint and draw the line through the midpoint of the width of that basically frame. Now again put a dot on the middle part of that width. Cut that piece halfway through using the hacksaw. Put the job on the vise and use the hacksaw using PPE. Make sure that you take appropriate care. Now we are going to make two drills at approximately 15 mm or 1.5 centimeter from the top at the middle part of the frame. So apply two dots, put the job into the bench vise, take a drill, 4 mm diameter drill, and make those two holes. Apply the same thing for the other side of the bracket. So repeat the same process for second side frame. Now we are going to basically make the base plate for fan. We are done with side plates. Now the base plate. So it is 15 centimeter by 16 centimeter plate. So again, mark the midpoints all across the length and width. So marking the midpoint 7.5 centimeter. Now we are going to make the frame assembly. Now we are going to put those side frames on that midpoint of the base plate. Match the midpoint of the side plate with the midpoint of the base plate, where we are going to basically apply the nails. Do the same thing for both the side plates. Apply nail using the hammer. Make sure that you take proper care and continue to use the gloves. Okay, so this is how basically the frame assembly is done. This is how it will look like. And in between those two side brackets, we are going to mount the spool and the fan. Okay, now let's basically make the holders for the fan. We are going to use again plywood to make the holders. So small wooden pieces, mark the line midway and use the mini hacksaw to cut the small wooden pieces as the brackets for the fan holder. Now put the dot, because we are going to make a drill, 4 mm drill, and we are going to use the same screw that we took it out from the empty spool. Now creating the assembly of holders. Now we are going to use these holder and the same screw and nuts that we took it out from the spool. We are going to use extra nut on the other side of the holder, because that we want that screw to be firm and tighten while using the fume extractor. Now let's mount the holder assembly onto the empty spool. Using these holders, we are going to mount the entire assembly onto the side brackets. So use hot glue again to mount these holders onto the spool. Apply enough hot glue so that these mounting brackets are held firmly while using the assembly. Do it all around the mounting brackets. Do the same thing for the other mounting bracket on the other side of the empty spool. So apply enough hot glue. Once this is done, let's mount fan onto the frame. Now we are almost done. Take this fan, which is mounted onto the empty spool and the brackets. So insert these screws through the holes onto the side brackets. Make sure that you keep the enough space between the two side brackets and the empty spool or the spool. Now we can call it as a fan holder. Now take these two wing nuts and tighten the wing nuts over those two screws. We can adjust the orientation of the fan before we tighten the wing nuts, so that we can keep the fan at a certain angle depending on how we are basically soldering. Okay, this is how basically we can change the orientation of the fan. Swing it over the two screws and tighten the nut after the orientation is done. Now put the fan again, put the switch on and try it. Yes, the fan is working. Now let's mount the LEDs. We need LEDs for having a light. So this is optional. Put 2 or 3 LEDs on the holes which are already there on that spool. We are using the same holes. We are not going to create any other extra holes. So this is the basic advantage of using available material in the lab. So put the LEDs, 2 or 3 LEDs. Now make serial connection, positive terminal to the negative terminal of the second LED, and like that we can complete the serial circuit. We are going to use a cable to connect between the two terminals. Apply solder material on the LED terminals and also onto the wire. Take help of your friend or your teacher while you are soldering the LED terminals to the wire. Continue to do tinning onto the other end of the wire. Before that, you can strip the end and take the cover out, coating out. Apply some solder material as a tinning on that other terminal and connect it to the other terminal of that second LED. Make sure that you are doing proper soldering. Now, for the next LED, apply tinning using the solder metal. We are going to do it outside because it is easy to assemble it that way. Now, find the positive terminal of that LED because we are going to solder the 220 ohm resistor, which is also needed into this circuit. Now, connect the 220 ohm resistor to the positive terminal and complete the circuit from the other LED. Do that soldering correctly. Now apply tinning onto the cable and connect the remaining terminals of those two LEDs. Now we are also going to use switch for the LEDs because whenever we have enough light into the room, we may not use the LEDs all the time. So we are going to use the switch to keep the LEDs off when we are not using the light. So take help of your friend or your teacher to apply some solder material onto the switch terminals. Connect that cable to one terminal and again do the same thing to the other terminal of the switch. We are going to use the rocker switch. Now put the wire and solder it correctly. Take help of your friend because this is needed. Now we are going to connect the switch between the two terminals. Now we are going to use the same connections of 12 volt DC adapter and make sure that we are going to connect the positive terminal of the adapter to the positive terminal of the LEDs and same thing with the ground terminal. Now we are going to connect the ground terminal first. We have taken one LED. We are going to keep two LEDs into this assembly now. So we are almost done with LED circuit. Now let's try working. Yeah, now he is soldering. He is turning the LEDs on because he needs the light, and he also has switched on the fan and he is doing some soldering. See, the fan is extracting the fume and he's also getting extra light. So this is how this beautiful DIY fume extractor is ready with LED lights. Now another activity we are going to make is do it yourself soldering helping hand, which is needed to hold the two components for soldering. So material required for this assembly is basically wood, crocodile clips, 1 core copper wire, electrical wire that you can find it in your lab or you can buy it from the electrical hardware store. You will also need the C clamp. We are also going to use the wire stripper, then soldering gun, soldering metal, the drilling machine with drill, and obviously we are going to use the safety PP equipment like gloves and goggles. Now let's basically work on the base plate for the hand. So let's mark the base plate, which is approximately 15 by 16 centimeter. So mark halfway through 8 centimeter along the length, draw a center line, and then this is 15 centimeter in width, so 7.5 centimeter midpoint. So we are going to draw the perpendicular line, which is again another center line of the base plate. Now mark 2 points, 5 centimeter on both sides of the center point on that line. So 5 centimeters on right side and 5 centimeters on the left side, where we are going to basically make two drills for mounting the copper wire. So drilling two holes on that base plate. So clamp the job onto the table using C clamp. Make sure that you are clamping the job properly. Wear safety gloves and take the wooden drill bit. So we are going to use 3.5 mm or 4 mm drill bit for making those two drills because the wire diameter is 3.5 mm. Now once the drills are done, we are going to basically cut those copper wires at a specific length. So 1 mm core copper wire, electrical wire. So we are going to cut two wires of 15 centimeters each. So we have cut one wire. Now we are going to cut another wire at exactly 15 centimeters. So two wires are ready for mounting those two wires, copper wires, onto the base plate. So insert one wire through one hole and apply glue or Feviquick so that it gets firm. So apply enough Fevikwik. Do not use too much of that, and take proper care while using the glue like Fevikwik. Okay. Put 2 dots from the other side of the plate so that this cable or the copper wire is firm. Now take another copper wire, insert through the second hole, and again use the glue to join it permanently. Apply it from the other side of the plate as well. Okay. Hold the job properly. You do not spill the glue all over. Just 1 or 2 drops are enough. Now stripping of copper wire. So let's strip copper wire from the other end. So use stripper. Take approximately 1 centimeter out, and then use the uh, bend nose plier for assembling the crocodile clips. So first bend the copper wire approximately 5 mm from the top. Take a crocodile clip, insert that copper cable through the hole that we just saw on that crocodile clip. Insert it properly, and take the bend nose plier to clamp that cable onto that crocodile clip. Now we are going to solder that crocodile clips. Do some tinning using the solder metal. We are going to use the fume extractor that we just built, while making or while soldering these joints. Use flux, and where the copper cables are taken out of that crocodile clip, apply enough soldering metal. Now do the same thing for second copper cable. Take it out of the second crocodile clip, bend it using nose plier. Now let's do soldering of the second copper cable. Do the soldering properly, apply enough soldering metal so that the joint becomes firm and strong. Apply it all across that length where the copper cable is passed through, and then turn it over. Turn the job over and apply the soldering on the other side of the joint where the copper cable we took that copper cable out and bent. Now this assembly is done. Now we are going to do actual working of DIY accessories, both the fume extractor and the helping hand. Use the helping hand to hold one cable. We are going to use one jumper cable. We are going to solder that to another white jumper cable. So in this case, you don't have anyone to hold those 2 cables. We are going to use the helping hand to hold these 2 wires together so that you can alone solder these. Make sure that you adjust the copper cables good enough. Adjust the 2 cables just next to each other. Apply the soldering. So we are using this helping hand to hold the 2 wires together. And at the same time, we are using the fume extractor. See, the fumes are being extracted using that fan. And we are also using the helping hand to make those solder joints. The advantage of this helping hand is, since there is no one to hold those 2 cables for you, this helping hand comes handy to you. It is holding those 2 jobs for you, and you are comfortably soldering the joints. Now let's see, it is done. We are going to check how the job is done. Yes, we did a good job of soldering, and that too with comfort. This is how our entire project looks like. The DIY soldering fume extractor and the soldering helping hands. Any questions? Thank you for watching this. Do you have any questions? Please post them on the channel. I am available to answer those questions. And I hope you enjoyed today's session. In this session, we have used all the available material in our lab to do it yourself, soldering accessories. So thank you very much again. And I'm sure that you are going to build these accessories for your soldering station in your labs. So thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.